audience. Welcome to Mr. Sandwich Reads at Home. I am Mr. Sandwich, and I am reading The King of Mulberry Street by Donna and Joe Napoli. Today I'm going to be reading chapter 13. Yep, Church. The last chapter, Sharks and Mooks, was kind of Dom's first day, I think, trying to survive. Really trying to, like a full day, trying to make it in America. He woke up, if you remember, in a barrel in an alleyway on Mulberry Street, or maybe like an alley just off of Mulberry Street. And what I really enjoy about this novel, it's worth pointing out, is the pacing that it goes at. So it's really happened in just a matter of really weeks, but it feels like days, because the only real fast forward that it does is when he's on the boat. It says, if you recall, at one point I think it took weeks. Like it went a little quicker than usual, or maybe no, they were behind. But it took weeks on the boat. Other than that, though, and he falls asleep and then he wakes up. So there's a little bit of like a passage in time between that. But really, other than that, we're following this character Dom, or Benyamo. You can even think with like the transformation in name has happened really in just a matter of in weeks that we've known the character. But as you follow along, it's happening almost in real time. You follow this character throughout his days. So that's just something I enjoy about this book is the way that timing is used along with the setting to really keep the pace moving. So it's like it feels like you're there. All right. When we left off, Dom had an upset stomach because Gaetano kind of played a dirty trick on him and didn't let him know, don't go crazy with the ice cream. You might be hungry, but don't eat too much ice cream because it's made with dirty ingredients, and if you've not had this ice cream before, your gut may not handle it. And he's told there at the very end, like, if you stick around long enough, your guts will get used to it. Get used to the dirty ingredients in the ice cream. It says, Gaetano, though, says it's the best ice cream, but it's not the cleanest ingredients. All right, we're going to read chapter 13, called Church, and then we're going to get, so again, it's a little bit of a lengthier chapter, and quick reminder on YouTube that you can, if my pacing is too fast or too slow, you can slightly, I wouldn't go double speed or anything, but by just a quarter, you can slow down or speed up the pacing of my reading on YouTube. That's an option. Next chapter we'll get to is going to be one of my favorites. You'll know why when we get there. But first, let's jump in. This is on page 108 of my copy. Again, chapter 13, Church. I knew Gaetano was following me, and he knew I knew. He didn't even try to hide. Every time I'd look over my shoulder, he'd be there, a half block behind. I didn't go to him, though, no matter how much I wanted company. The ice cream had taught me a lesson. Anyone who would let me get that sick couldn't be trusted. Mama was right. Eduardo was right. No one could be trusted. Except maybe Tin Pan Alley. Tin Pan Alley was a stand-up kind of guy, but he was off somewhere with his padrone. So I walked up and down alleys, relieving myself whenever the cramps from the ice cream were too great, never stopping for longer than that, trying to lose Gaetano. After a while, I stumbled the 2 blocks east to Elizabeth Street, where Gaetano told me the Siciliani lived. He followed, but when I went beyond that, he stopped and turned around. I got scared. Was something awful east of Elizabeth Street? After all, Gaetano seemed to know everything. I turned back, and there he was, waiting for me. He followed. 4 blocks west of Baxter, he stopped again, so I turned back. Then I went south. Gaetano didn't cross Park, but I knew there was nothing dangerous south of Park because I'd gone all the way to the wharves. That meant Gaetano was like the stray dogs back in Napoli. He had a territory. If I slept outside his territory, he couldn't bother me. But the only place I knew to sleep in was my barrel. I wandered south of Park until I felt sure he'd given up. Then I snuck back to my barrel. Sunday morning announced itself with church bells. For a moment, I thought I was home in Napoli. Those could have been the bells of San Domenico Maggiore. or Cappella San Severo, or the Duomo itself. I thought of that last morning in Napoli. Mama's black hair spread across my arm, the smell of meatballs and citronella candles. Sneaking out. I remembered other mornings too, her constant singing, her hand on my cheek, how she lifted me to touch the mezuzah. I didn't cry though. I didn't make any noise at all. Nothing to let anyone know where I was. Napoli was a dream world. I was here, in America, in my barrel. I had to make sure Gaetano didn't see me getting out of the barrel. I peeked over the edge. An old woman with a sack thrown across her back rummaged at the opening of the alley, putting bones in the sack. When she saw me, she ran off. This area was filled with rag pickers. Most were women or boys who worked for a padrone picking up junk. I'd seen them the day before. I jumped out of the barrel and ran all the way to the wharf. The top deck of the Bolivia was empty. The third-class passengers must have been taken to Ellis Island fast, or maybe the Bolivia only had first and second class. I ran to the plank. A man came down, addressing me in English. "I need a job on your ship," I said. "I can do anything and everything. I'll be the errand boy. Everyone's job will be easier with me around." "Italian?" he said in English. Then he tried to shoo me away. I stood my ground. He said more things, louder. I wouldn't leave. Excuse me. He waved over someone from across the street, a policeman. "Okay, keep calm," I told myself. "Walk, don't run, like when a dog's coming at you." I walked around the wharf road without looking back. I crossed the road and went back up to the neighborhood Gaetano called 5 Points. Gaetano appeared in my path almost immediately. I knew he would. He looked cleaner than usual. His hair was slicked down, and the crust he'd had on his chin the day before was gone. I've been looking for you. It's time to go to church." "I don't go to church." "Don't say that." Gaetano hit me on the ear. "Don't ever say that." He walked ahead up Mulberry Street. "Come on." I didn't move. "Come on," he said. "There's food." "Why would you care if I get food?" "I'll get more if you're with me. Come on, don't be a mook." I caught up to him. Gaetano looked down his nose at me. "Yesterday you told me you told that mook we were friends. So are you my friend or not?" We walked. "Speak up. Are you my friend or my enemy?" "I'm not your enemy," I said. He grinned. Gaetano was the biggest grinner I'd ever met. "Then when I say come, you come. Cimo ve bene appresso mi vene." I knew that proverb. If you like me, you follow me. It seemed strange that someone as young as Gaetano would recite proverbs. He was trying to make himself seem important. "How come you never leave this area?" I asked. He smirked. "You think you're smart. You think you're smarter than people who are a lot older than you." I shrugged. "Like I said, you know nothing. You want to get sick on meat from a Polish butcher, huh? Or fish from a Yiddish fish peddler? What do Polish and Yiddish mean?" "Dirty. Polish people come from Poland. Yiddish people come from Germany and other places. Some of the Poles are Jews, and all the Yids are. If you go outside 5 Points, who knows what they'll feed you? You'll get sick as a dog." "Jews? Dirty? Never." "Sick? Sick as I got from the Italian ice cream?" "Don't be disloyal to Italians," said Gaetano. That stung. Nona had always prized loyalty. She said the worst thing you could do was leave someone you loved hanging in the wind. But I didn't want to give Gaetano the satisfaction of agreeing with him. "Yesterday you said the Genoveso were pigs. Between you and me, sure. Among the Neapolitani, you can criticize the people from Geneva all you want. But don't ever criticize them to people who aren't Italian. Loyalty is more important than anything else." There was something about his voice that made him seem younger than he was. I felt bolder. "So you stay within 5 Points so you won't get sick from Jewish food?" I said. "I don't believe you. I think you're afraid. You're a rabbit." "Me? A rabbit? It has nothing to do with being afraid. Have you talked to anyone out there?" "I talked to a ship captain just this morning. Maybe the man I talked to wasn't the captain, but it sounded good." "In Neapolitano?" "Well, sure, I spoke Neapolitano." What did he speak? English. How's your English? Said Gaetano. Which way Chatham Square? I said in English. I expected him to laugh. He looked stricken. Where'd you learn that? You go to school, huh? All the Italian kids in the Bronx go to school. Remember, he thinks Dom is from the Bronx, so he doesn't realize he's like right off the boat from Napoli. He thinks his mom is in the Bronx, just uptown. All the Italian kids in the Bronx go to school. Those are the only English words I know. You swear? What was he all worked up about? Of course. You better not be making fun of me. I'm not. Don't make fun of me ever. Gaetano threw back his shoulders. I don't make fun of anyone, I said quietly. If you're my friend, you don't make fun of me. Ever. I won't. Ever. He looked around, then he turned back to me. So that's all the English you know? That's it? Well, once you try to say other things, you'll see. Go outside 5 Points and people laugh at how you talk. How do you know? You don't go outside. I hear the 5 Points men complaining, he said. That's why they only work for other Italians. They can't work in Chatham Square because they don't learn English? That and other things. Italians belong together anyway, especially Southern Italians. I scratched dirt off my arm. Let me get this straight. Immigrants who aren't Italian, they learn English? Yeah, you should hear the big dumb Swedes speaking English in the factories in Chatham Square. Dumb like a fox, I said. The Italians aren't the dumb ones. It's better to learn English and get any job you want. What'd I tell you about being loyal? Said Gaetano. Especially here, right now. Why especially here? I asked. Because of the Irish. Shut up, okay? Gaetano stopped. See that big building across Prince Street? That's St. Patrick's Cathedral. The bells rang as we stood there. People came from the north and went through the central front door with the pointed arch over it. People came from behind us on Mulberry Street and went around to the side. Gaetano walked toward the side entrance. Why don't we go in the front door? I asked. Because we're not Irish. Shut up. I mean it. We went down to the basement. Everyone crowded onto benches. I stared straight ahead at the neck of the woman in front of me. She reached a hand up under her black mantilla and a curl tumbled down. Her hair wasn't as dark as Mama's, but that curl made my face prickle with pins and needles. She tucked it back under. It fell again. A priest came in. Everyone stood. For the next hour, the priest spoke in an Italian that I could mostly understand and a Latin that I loved listening to. We stood and sat and kneeled and recited Latin. They passed around a basket. People put in coins, not Gaetano. The priest read a part of the Bible about St. Paul working hard. Then he talked about the virtue of persisting against the odds, which fits along with the themes of this book. He talked about the opportunities that lay within reach for hard workers. He said Italians could never be faulted for not working hard. The people murmured agreement. He said the possibilities were endless for us, for every last one of us. I thought of Uncle Aurelio and his lectures on La Possibilità. Uncle Aurelio, who would be aghast to see me at a Catholic Mass. My whole family would. I was. I stood up to leave, but Gaetano yanked me back into my seat. Stay still, he hissed. The gospel is the most important part. I looked at my hands and tried to close my ears to what was going on outside my head. It was my body in this church, not my heart and soul. Afterward, I asked Gaetano, why go to this church if the Irish make you sit in the basement? Aren't there Italian churches? Sure there are, but they're outside 5 Points. Here, they're only Irish churches. The most precious blood church and the Church of the Transfiguration, and this one, St. Patrick's. But Italians have to sit in the basement at the other churches too, and the Transfiguration is on Mott Street. I hate Mott Street. Anyway, it's better than it used to be. They used to forbid the priest from using Italian. He pulled me into a building a block away. Adults drank coffee and ate pastries. Kids ran around knocking into things. Gaetano stuffed a pastry in his mouth and filled a cup with coffee. I did the same. I didn't usually like coffee, but it was delicious at that moment. I hadn't had anything to eat since the ice cream Saturday afternoon. I've seen you here before, said a woman in an Italian dialect as she approached Gaetano. But without your little brother. Where's your mother? She's sick, said Gaetano, speaking her dialect, just like speaking her dialect, just like he'd spoken the Irish, or excuse me, just like he'd spoken the ice cream vendor's Genovese the day before. So Gaetano, if we're thinking about assimilation, was a word I've used in the past about like blending in to your surroundings, kind of taking on the characteristics of the people around you. And Gaetano's pretty good at picking up on those dialects and kind of reflecting back the dialects that the adults are speaking to him with. Let's see. She's sick. He had spoken to the ice cream vendor in Genovese the day before. That's too bad. She looked doubtful. What's her name? Gaetano backed toward the door. Don't run off, said the woman. She picked up 2 more pastries and handed us each one. If your family joins, then when someone gets sick, we'll help out. And when someone dies, we'll pay for the funeral costs. Tell your mother that. I will, said Gaetano. Or better, let me tell her. A little girl yanked on the woman's skirt. The woman picked her up without turning her eyes from us. Where do you live? One hand caressed the little girl's head. Mommy used to do that to me all the time. I can bring your mother soup, said the woman, her hand on the child's cheek. What do you think? Does this woman really want to help Gaetano's mother, or does she not trust Gaetano and she's kind of trying to get it out of him? I'm not really sure. Let's find out. We have to go. Yeah, Gaetano's ready to get out of there now. We can bring her soup. We have to go. Gaetano put down his cup and took my hand. We're late. See you next week, said the woman. Gaetano pulled me outside and we ate our pastries. Next week, I'll go to a different one. A different what? I asked, forcing away the picture of the woman's hand on the child's cheek. Are there always parties after church? It's not a party. It's a meeting of a mutual aid society. There are lots of them around here. Don't they have them in the Bronx? I shrugged. What dialect were you talking with her? Milanese. It's from the north of Italy. Do you speak every Italian dialect? I asked. Nah, only the useful ones. To tell the truth, I hardly speak Milanese at all, just enough to keep out of trouble for sneaking in. Why don't you go to a mutual aid society for people from Napoli? Gaetano laughed. There aren't any. It costs 50 cents a month to be a member. None of the southern Italians can afford that, and the northerners wouldn't let us join theirs anyway, even if we had the money. Why not? They look down on us, and we don't care. Who needs them? Look, it's like this, Dom. You're Neapolitano. I'm Neapolitano. We're our own group. We stick together. But the next best guy is someone from the south, except for Sicilia. Don't ever trust Siciliano. But the Calabrese aren't too bad. There's lots of them on Mulberry Street. And the ones from Basilicata, they're dirt poor, and they know nothing, but they're okay. And then after that, there's northern Italians, the Piemontesi, the Lombardi. They live west of Broadway. Then who? No one. After the Italians, there's no one you can trust. What else do these societies do besides help with funerals and take care of the sick? Sometimes they get jobs for people, and if they can't find anything in New York, they'll pay your fare to the coal mines in Pennsylvania or West Virginia. Or, if you want to go farther, Colorado or Wyoming or Montana. But then you have to work with Slavs and Welshmen. Still, the mines will always hire Italians first. Tonino had a job in a coal mine. He must be off in one of those places. That's what you should do when you're older, Gaetano. Start a mutual aid society for Southern Italians, not some stupid bank. People who run mutual aid societies don't get rich, bankers get rich. Everything he said came out like the gospel of that priest, like a truth no one could argue with. How do you know everything, Gaetano? I pay attention. No one pays attention that well, I said. He grinned. They would if they got paid for it. You get paid for paying attention? I see something someone would want to know. I hear something someone would want to know, and I sell the information. Gaetano sat down on the steps of a building and stretched his legs in front of him, crossed at the ankles. He leaned his elbow back on a higher step. How can you figure out what someone would want to know? People need information, all kinds of information. They pay me for the craziest things. You wouldn't believe it. And don't get any ideas about sticking around here and stealing my job. You'd never survive. You don't understand anything you see. Sticking around here is the last thing I want to do. I sat beside him. Gaetano really did understand everything he saw. People wouldn't pay him for information if he couldn't be trusted. Want another job, Gaetano? Who's offering? You? You've got nothing to pay with. It killed me to say it, but what else did I have? My shoes. Gaetano sat up. What's the job? Get me onto the ship that's down at the wharves, the Bolivia. You want to go on a ship? Where? Napoli. Gaetano stared at me. Then he gasped. You're not from Bronx at all. You're fresh off the boat, aren't you? You're really lost. He slapped on one fist into the other palm. I should have known it. Why? How could you have known? He flushed. If you had a mother, she'd have come storming down here by now. His temples pulsed. His jaw tightened. Is your mother really sick, like you told that woman? That's none of your business. Do you have a mother? I asked. Shut up. I mean it. Don't ever ask about my family. I raised my hands in surrender to calm him down. Then I leaned toward him. Get me onto the ship, and these shoes are yours. I don't go down to the wharves. You know that. Gaetano shook his head at me. You're alone. You don't have a padrone. Now I get it. The way you act so much older than you are. That's all it takes. A few days alone, and you grow up just like that. What else could you do? I've seen it before. Kids like you acting so big. You don't have to talk to anyone in English out there, I said. Just come with me to the wharves. Come and listen and watch. Figure out a way to get me on the ship. Please, I want to go home. Gaetano looked away. I knew by now that that was what he did when he was trying to make up his mind. I squeezed my hands together. He turned back to me. I'm not promising a thing, but I'll see what I can do. When's this ship sailing? I don't know, but it's got to be soon. Meet you back here at supper time. He got up and walked down Mulberry. And don't follow me, he called over his shoulder. Excuse me. So I went the other way, up Mulberry. No one talked to me, no one looked at me. Mulberry ran into another street at an angle. If I kept going in the same general direction, there was no way I could get lost. The only thing I needed to know was where to angle off on the way back. I counted the number of streets I crossed. At the fifth corner, my street angled again. Well, okay, I could keep track of that. At the fifth corner, this street angled too. That was easy to remember. 5 and 5. I was at the edge of a park. The street sign said park with the little letters AVE in the upper right corner. I knew park. It was the one word of English I could read. And suddenly I made the connection. The Italian word parco and the English word park. They must mean the same thing. English wasn't such a hard language after all. Could this possibly be the same Park Street that ran into Chatham Square? Just in case it wasn't, I counted blocks again. I walked along looking around at the tall buildings, the passing carriages, the people. Stores were closed and shuttered, but I looked at the carvings in the stone over doorways and the huge feathered hats that the ladies wore. Most of the women held on to the arm of a man. One woman strode by me with a frilly white blouse and a skirt with a wide waistband. 2 rows of buttons ran down the front of her blouse. She wasn't pretty, but she caught the eye. Mama would have been beautiful in those clothes. I lost count of the blocks somewhere after 20 because I looked up and my breath was taken away. A giant building loomed ahead. There were 3 levels of windows. I walked along one side, counting the cupolas. Behind the building was a large train shed. Oh, it was a railway station. I went inside. Men in the white straw hats with black bands around the center and broad brims stood in groups. Some carried canes, though they weren't old. They wore ties and vests under their jackets and spoke English. But then I saw men with curly black hair and mustaches and bow ties. They spoke Neapolitano and they bought tickets to Bronxville. 8 cents for a 20-minute ride. They complained about the high fare, but that was what it cost to visit the relatives on Sunday. I went out to the train platforms. A gleaming steam engine pulled in. I watched people and trains for hours. When I got too hungry to stay still, I left, passing an area where they kept baggage. A penny to check your belongings overnight. A penny for this, a penny for that. Life in New York was measured out in pennies. It was hours yet till supper time. So I let myself wander. After all, I could say park, and anyone could point me to the back to the right road. Within a couple of blocks, I wound up on a broad street. I followed it a long way and came to the countryside. Look at that. Manhattan wasn't such a big place after all. I'd walked the whole length of it. Where there was country, there was farm, and where there was farms, there was food. A family sprawled on tablecloths spread out on the grass, finishing a meal. The smell of strange spices hung in the air. Fancy food, and these people looked fancy. Not at all like farmers. They wore their Sunday best. I hid behind a tree and watched. A few children took handfuls of leftovers and ran toward a pond. Three huge water birds, white things with long necks, swam at the edge. They looked toward the children expectantly. One of them got out of the water and waddled up. The children screamed and laughed and threw food at the birds. Perfectly good food. I ran out and grabbed a handful. It looked like a pastry with something green in the middle. Spinach? Honk! A big bird charged me, flapping giant wings. Honk, honk, honk. I clutched the food and ran. The bird ran faster. It bit the back of my pant leg, its huge bill clamping onto my flesh. I threw the pastry at it. The bird let go and swallowed it whole, then honked at me. But I was already running again. The bird went back into the water. I watched from a safe distance. How could such beautiful birds be so nasty? I was sure they weren't as hungry as I was. They looked sleek and clean. These must be geese, and geese are notorious for being they can get pretty aggressive. They looked sleek and clean. I was so dirty and thirsty. That water looked pretty good. I circled the pond and went down to its edge farther from the dangerous birds. I drank and washed my face. Then I rolled up my pant legs and waded in. The bird had left two red marks on the back of my calf, but the skin wasn't broken. My hair was clumped with filth, so I leaned forward and dunked my head and rubbed at my hair. It felt so good. When I turned, a woman stood on the shore. She was from the family whose children had fed those birds. She waved and put a piece of paper on the ground with food on it. Then she walked away. I waded out and grabbed the paper. I wolfed down a pastry, spinach with the sour white cheese, and there was eggplant with beef and a sauce. The sauce was white. Oh no. I licked it. It didn't taste like milk or cheese, so maybe it was white from flour. If that was so, the dish was kosher. No mixing of milk and meat. Should I risk it? Chi nun risika, nun risaka. Risika. He who doesn't risk doesn't gain. One of Nona's proverbs. But I'd never heard of her say it about risking breaking kosher laws. Still, I nibbled. It was good. I ate all of it. Then there was a corner of sweet pastry with nuts and honey. What a feast! Not Italian food, but good food. I wandered off to view the farms I expected to find past the next set of trees. There were only more trees, though, and more paths with more people. I came upon a throng of people out for a Sunday stroll in the sun, and here was a wide set of stairs with a big fountain and another pond. People took rides on the little boats with awning tops. This wasn't the countryside at all. It was a colossal park. The atmosphere was like that at a saint festival. Everyone was happy and talking and calling to their children. The women had parasols with lace at the edges. In Napoli, which rich women held them to keep the sun off their faces. I could pick out English easily, but there were many other languages too. Bicyclists went past with white caps and numbers on their shirts. On another path, people rode by on horseback. How big was this park, anyway? I went in a straight line until I hit a road on one side. Then I went in a straight line in the opposite direction until I hit a road on the other side. It was as far across this park as it was from my home in Napoli to the bottom of Via Toledo. Now I walked along one edge to find out how long the park was north to south, but it was getting late and people were leaving, so I had to start back. I walked and walked and walked. It took more than an hour to get to the south end of the park. I ran. Stupid me. Gaetano would be waiting on the steps by now. The street was empty of walkers and only the occasional carriage passed. I tried to flag one down. The driver yelled at me and sped up. The next one did the same. I ran faster. I heard a train to my left. Good, that was where the depot was supposed to be. I ran a long way. Then I turned and went 2 streets over. The street lamps were lit now, and the sign said park. Everything was exactly how it was supposed to be, except that I was late. I couldn't run anymore. I was out of breath. And I got spooked by every shadow. The buildings were too tall here. Who knew what could jump out from between them? Or fall from a window high up? I walked in the street at the edge so carriages wouldn't hit me. Finally, I came to the medium-sized park. I ran by the steps of St. Patrick's Cathedral to the Mutual Aid Society. It was night by now. What a fool I'd been to stay in the park so long. No Gaetano. I went to my barrel and slept. All right, so let's just reflect real quick. What happened here in this chapter? Well, he ends up he having left Park Ave. And what's he originally looking for? Park Street. But he's keeping track. He starts counting. He recognizes the word park. Okay, but then he stumbles into, well, he thinks it's farmland, right? It's open field. Well, if you know New York City at all, and it's probably worth taking a little virtual tour at least of New York City, he has stumbled into Central Park, which is longer north-south than it is wider east-west. So it's a good thing he didn't go all the way north. He'd been stranded. So he didn't realize, he's going to see the word park in a few spots, and he's stumbled into Central Park. So he gets lost, and he misses, Gaetano said, I'll help you get on the boat for your shoes. I'll help you. Something's got to be in it for Gaetano to get Gaetano's help. One thing to reflect on after reading this chapter, because at the beginning of the chapter, he's like, lesson learned, don't trust anybody, don't trust Gaetano. He tricked me with the dirty ice cream, not giving me a warning about that. So do you trust Gaetano? Gaetano is kind of like, in this chapter, he helped him out. He gets him out of trouble when the guy on the wharfs at the dock calls the police. Gaetano kind of gets him out of there. Let's go to church. We can get some food at the church. Gaetano knows where the free food is. But he tricked him with the ice cream. Do you think Gaetano was there earlier in the night and was ready to get him on the boat back to Napoli? Or do you think Gaetano was a no-show anyways? So something to think about. Do you trust Gaetano as a character? Okay. I hope you enjoyed. I may get on here and try to do a little virtual tour of New York City, because I think it helps to kind of orient. The thing to know too about New York City is it's basically set up or Manhattan is set up like a grid. So it is fairly easy to kind of follow where you're going. But once you stumble into the Central Park right in the middle of Manhattan, you can get lost in the park. All right. Please stay tuned for the next chapter. I hope you enjoyed. And yeah. All right. Take care. Peace.